Around 4:15 a.m. on the 20th of December 1888, Police Sergeant Robert Golding and Constable Thomas Costello were on patrol when they came across the lifeless body of a woman in Clark's Yard, Poplar, London. She was laying on her left side, her left leg drawn up and right leg extended. Her clothes were not torn or disturbed, and there were no signs of injury. She had on her black and brown outer clothes, a dark tweed jacket, a lilac apron, a red flannel petticoat, red and blue striped stockings, and 6 pence in cash. Identifying who this young lady was would be the Christmas mission of the local police. Many people came forward. She was Drunken Lizzie to some, Fair Alice to others, along with a handful of other names. It would take until the 28th of December for her to be conclusively identified and the reason for the raft of names to become clear. A common theme was that the young lady had spoken about her mother often. She currently lived near Baker's Row, Whitechapel, and also near the thoroughfare of Pelham Street. Door-to-door inquiries found Margaret Mylett. She visited the mortuary, where she found the body of her 26-year-old daughter, Catherine Rose Mylett. Rose Mylett, or Catherine Mylett, was born in London on the 8th of December 1859. Mother Margaret Mylett, née Haley, and Henry Mylett were of Irish descent and lived in Thomas Street, Whitechapel. He worked as a labourer in the starch works. She had an older sister Mary and an older brother William, and one younger brother John. Henry, her father, would pass away in February 1882. Rose was living with Thomas Davis, an upholsterer and commercial traveller. She was found on the census as Kate Mylett and as Davis. It was not unusual for a woman to take the name of the man she was in a relationship with, even if they weren't married, for appearance's sake. They had a daughter together, Florence Beatrice, on the 12th of September 1880, and a son, Henry, born on the 29th of June 1883. Henry would unfortunately pass away within his first year, and Florence would go to live with Margaret, Rose's mum, and was away at school when Rose died. Her relationship with Thomas would continue until early 1888, when they would part. Catherine was given the name Rose by history because it was the alias she used in Bromley Infirmary. Records show that throughout the 1880s she had many stays there, the last one being the 20th of January to the 14th of March 1888, always with the same vague and unspecified illness. Rose would live in various parts of the East End. It seemed she had a different name for each area. Rose in Bromley by Bow, Elizabeth Davis in Whitechapel, and Alice Downey in Poplar. Rose was fond of a drink, and it earned her the nicknames Drunken Lizzie Davis in Whitechapel and Spitalfields, and in Poplar she was called Fair Alice. In the months before her death, she was living in a lodging house at 18 George Street, Spitalfields, and she was in a relationship with Benjamin Goodson. On the 19th of December 1888, around 7:55 p.m, Rose was seen by Charles Bartolome, an infirmary night attendant. He was able to identify her as the woman he saw after a mortuary visit. She was in conversation with two sailors in Poplar High Street, one around 5'11" tall, and in Charles's opinion, looked like a Yankee. The other shorter at 5'7". She appeared sober, but was heard by Charles to say no, no, no to one of them. It occurred to him that they were up to no good, and that is why he took such close notice of the three. At 2:30 a.m. on the 20th of December 1888, Alice Graves saw Rose outside the George Public House on Commercial Road. Again she was with two men, but now she was drunk. Just an hour and 45 minutes later, the police officers would find Rose deceased in Clark's Yard. The police, from observing the scene, decided the death must be suicide or a sudden death from natural causes. Death was confirmed by Assistant Divisional Surgeon Dr. George James Harris. At first the doctors, though, were at a loss as to what caused her death. Coroner's assistant Curtin T. Shivers was the first to discover a mark around Rose's neck, which was about 1/8 of an inch deep, with some scratches above it. It wasn't until the post-mortem on the 21st of December 1888 that a faint mark resembling the imprint of a string was found around her neck. Dr. Matthew Brownfield concluded that Rose died of strangulation. From his report, blood was oozing from the nostrils, and there was a slight abrasion on the right side of the face. On the neck there was a mark which had evidently been caused by a cord drawn tightly around the neck, from the spine to the left ear. Such a mark would be made by a 4-thread cord. There was also impressions of the thumbs and middle and index fingers of some person plainly visible on each side of the neck. There were no injuries to the arms or legs. The stomach was full of meat and potatoes, which had only recently been eaten. Death was due to strangulation. The deceased could not have done it herself. The marks on her neck were probably caused by her trying to pull the cord off. He thought the murderer must have stood at the left rear of the woman, and having the ends of the cords wrapped round his hands, and thus strangled her. If it had been done in this way, it would account for the mark not completely going all around the neck. However, not all doctors involved agreed. Dr. Robert Anderson observed that there was no struggle in the yard, no signs of attack on the body or clothes. There was no second set of footprints in the soft ground of the yard. He concluded natural causes. The police sided with Dr. Anderson and concluded that Rose was not murdered. Dr. Thomas Bond of Westminster was sent for to re-examine the body. He agreed with Anderson. It was not murder. It was worth noting that it was 5 days after a discovery that Dr. Bond inspected the body, and it is possible that the marks could have faded. There were no secondary signs of strangulation, though. He put forward the idea that Rose had fallen down drunk and was choked to death by her stiff velvet collar. But the medical reports contradicted some of the witness statements. First, there was no alcohol in her stomach, so how was she drunk when Alice saw her, just hours before she was found dead? And also, if she wasn't drunk, how had she fallen over and choked herself with her collar? Second, it reported that she hadn't given birth, but it was conclusive she had 2 children. The inquest into Rose's death was held under Win Baxter at Poplar Town Hall on December the 21st, 1888, and again on the 2nd of January 1889, and then again on the 9th of January 1889. Such was the variety of opinions that different doctors held about Rose and her cause of death. Dr. Brownfield's report was not supported by the police, who pointed out that there was no string or ligature discarded at the scene, and the mark on her neck only encircled about 1/4 of the circumference of her neck. Win Baxter, the coroner, did not believe the, quote, nonsense of death by natural causes. In his summing up at the inquest, he told the jury, quote, after Dr. Bromfield and his assistant, duly qualified men, came to the conclusion that this was a case of homicidal strangulation, someone had a suspicion that the evidence was not satisfactory. At all events, you've heard the doctor after doctor went down to view the body without my knowledge or sanction as coroner. I did not wish to make that a personal matter, but I had never received such treatment before. Of the 5 doctors who saw the body, Dr. Bond was the only one who considered the case not to be one of murder. Dr. Bond did not see the body until 5 days after the death, and he was therefore at a disadvantage. The jury chose to side with the coroner and Dr. Brownfield, and they returned the verdict of wilful murder by person or persons unknown. Rose made her living as a lady of the night, and she was found 2 miles from the Whitechapel murders. Even though Rose didn't experience any violence and mutilation that had plagued the Whitechapel just weeks previous, the public and of course the press began to ask the question, is this the return of Jack the Ripper? The Star newspaper went above and beyond to whip up panic, quoting a source close to Dr. George Bagster Phillips, the police surgeon who had inspected Annie Chapman's body at the scene of 29 Hanbury Street, saying in his opinion, quote, the Poplar murder and the Whitechapel murderer are one and the same man. The method of preliminary strangulation was certainly employed in Hanbury Street and was possibly employed in the other cases. Dr. Bagster Phillips vehemently denied speaking to the newspaper and that was his opinion, accusing them of fabricating the statement, which they probably did. Sensation sold, and the truth wasn't going to get in the way of that. The one aspect of this case that all the doctors agreed upon was that Rose was not a victim of Jack. The police, in particular Commissioner Munro, was unhappy that their reports and findings were ignored and therefore refused to launch an investigation, deeming it a waste of time and manpower. Therefore, the murder of Rose Mylett remains unsolved. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.